Okay. Hi, Fred. Welcome to the Explorer Poet podcast.
Hi, Josh. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure before we go too far, is Fred okay? Is that what you go by?
Yeah, Fred is fine.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So, Fred, the reason I reached out to you is because I actually came across your on Twitter, or X, the app formerly known as Twitter. I came across some of your material there where you talk a lot about narcissism and narcissists, and more importantly, not from the narcissist side, but actually from the side of someone who's dealing with a narcissist. And it's all very, as I was saying before, I'm fascinated by psychology and the interactions between people. I find it fascinating at the individual level, like the group or relationship level, and then also on the societal level. I see it all kind of playing together. But yeah, when I saw what you were posting and kind of the focus there, it was very interesting to me. And so I wanted to reach out. So I appreciate you taking the time. Just to jump into it, like why is this a focus for you, or what is it about narcissism in general that makes you feel like you want to share some information that you've come across?
It's a good question because I've had experiences with some, and I realized I was sort of moving forward, being able to get my life back together, heal, learn stuff. And I just had some, it was weird because when I came across it the first time, it was as though I got a few pieces of information that made me understand what happened, such as a person lied. So that was the first thing, like a first domino falling down. And everything fell into place relatively quickly to understand what was happening. And then it was largely about, well, how do I move forward? How do I heal? How do I move on? How do I avoid just getting stuck in this? With the idea that however much time you spend around toxic people, that's a heavy price to pay. But the longer you linger on this, the more the price increases. But then I was seeing on Twitter a lot of the content around it that to me was just downright unhelpful, counterproductive, overly simplistic. A lot of people giving advice that might have been well-intentioned, but I could see it being just catastrophic. And lo and behold, I think I'd probably a year before I'd read a book by a FBI hostage negotiator, Chris Voss. And I could see people, giving advice of, you should stand up to the narcissist and show them that what they're doing is wrong. And I just got frustrated. I realized writing tweets is not the best way to do it. So I recorded a probably 45-minute freestyle video of saying, okay, if we apply proper hostage negotiation techniques to the situation, this is what you have to understand. This is what you have to see. So this is my contribution to trying to avoid people wasting time. And somehow about a year later, that video took off. Another video took off. And it seemed that there's an angle where you can bring a multidisciplinary approach to the situation to actually try to help people move forward, solve the situations, avoid being stuck in there, get the best outcomes possible, which might not be great, but probably better than using the wrong techniques and strategies. And so that's what I've been trying to do both on YouTube, Twitter, wherever else I'm active, is bring a fresh perspective, tools that work, something that actually works on the one hand, and on the other. So it can be negotiating, decoding, understanding what's going on. And on the other hand, there's a part of figuring out how to heal, how to move forward, how to put this in the past. So that's what I'm trying to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way that you go directly to negotiating, because I have this thing that I always say where if you're in a relationship, you're either negotiating that relationship or you're in a hostage situation. So either you have a voice and you can like work with the other person in the relationship, or you don't. And if you don't, then that obviously means that this is a relationship that's not going to go the direction that you want it to go. And I'm just curious, maybe before we jump even further in, maybe we should define some terms, or at least talk about, what specifically a narcissist is and how that differs from a narcissistic personality disorder versus just anybody who's got some self-preservation inside of them. So how does all this stuff, fit together? Or how do you define it so that you can actually work with these topics?
So that's a great starting point, because it's true. We often use words that are not defined, not well understood, and that creates more confusion. And if we view things as having building blocks to try to understand the world, we want to make sure the building blocks are accurate and solid, or else everything else crumbles. The I think the first thing that people misunderstand is what is a what's the name? There was a sociologist who spoke about ideal types or pure types. So what is a pure type? Because a narcissist is a pure type. It's not an actual human being. It's a concept. And what we see in the medical literature when people define illnesses and so on is they're trying to take specific examples, specific people, see what they have in common, move up one level to the conceptual level to create a concept that can explain the specifics. So we have to move up from the individual to the conceptual, and the conceptual should be relevant to the individual. This is a mistake, incidentally, I see quite often, is people thinking, this person who's torturing me emotionally doesn't tick all the boxes, so how do I know they're a narcissist? And it's a bit like if you've seen the hair psychopathy test. I think there are 23 questions which you can rate from 0, 1, or 2. So in other words, not at all, low, applies a bit, applies a lot. And you don't have to hit 46 out of 46 points to be a psychopath. Basically, if you're anywhere above 30, it's pretty worrying. And if you're somewhere below 20, it's normal. If you're below 10, you're low. But it's normal to have some of these traits. One way I like to view it is simply saying, there are toxic behaviors, toxic traits, toxic ways of acting. All of us can be a bit toxic sometimes. We get offended, we have ego defenses, we're a bit immature, we're emotional, we're scared, worried, we have injuries and so on. It's normal, it's part of being human. Some people are constantly a bit toxic. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's exhausting, very difficult to deal with because they constantly are nagging, constantly trying to drain you. So that's one category that's difficult. Some people sometimes are extremely toxic. That's often you walk on eggshells around someone. The person's a loose cannon. It's a volcano awaiting to erupt or a ticking time bomb. That can also be terrible. That typically is massive fight in the car on the way to have Christmas dinner with your parents or your friends. So you show up, it's a catastrophe. You seem to have a bad mood. They seem absolutely fine. So it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it's terrible. And some people are constantly extremely toxic. So if we think of these 4 squares, and it's not exactly in the square, we sort of navigate between them. What I think is important is to think, in what direction is the relationship going? Is the other person going? Are they trying to minimize the toxicity, try to be less of a pain in the backside? Will they recognize when they do something wrong? Are they able to say, I'm sorry, I overreacted. I was stressed for work and by work, and it's not okay. I wish I hadn't overreacted. I'm sorry. Or are they moving in the direction of more frequent toxicity or more intense toxicity or both? And then at the end of the day, once we can map out the toxicity, I think it's just a matter of saying, how's this relationship working out for you? How are you enjoying the dynamics? If you talk about it, if you try to make it better, to what extent is the other person reactive or responsive? To what extent are you able to together improve things? Are you able to reduce your toxicity? Are they able to reduce theirs? Because we all have some. To what extent are they blaming everything on you? To what extent are they taking ownership or not? And at the end of the day, let's imagine nothing changes. Is it working out for you? If it is, great. If it isn't, well, then you have to think about it. So to me, quote unquote, a narcissist is the ideal type of all of the toxic behaviors, sort of an archetype of someone who's completely obnoxious. And then we use this to compare with people, because otherwise it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's saying, I got 3 paper cuts. It's probably just a coincidence. It's like, maybe. But if you start realizing all of these behaviors, you start getting a pattern. You can say, you can criticize my dress sense. Okay. You can suddenly criticize my cooking, whereas before my cooking was great. Okay. You can talk about one of your colleagues in a rather bizarre way. Okay. You can, knowing I'm a specialist in something, you can go and ask someone else for advice. Okay. You can put me down on this and that. Okay. You can not return phone calls, or you can suddenly be jealous. At one point, all of these individual behaviors that in themselves are not really a problem, at one point, that's a lot of small things that become problematic. So to me, the narcissist is the concept that helps you identify the toxic behaviors in real people. And then it's just a matter of saying, I see a pattern, I can determine if the pattern works for me or if it doesn't work.
Yeah. And so when you talk about narcissism, in general, you're not actually talking to the narcissist. I guess in when you do your blogging, when you do your podcasting, you're probably not talking to the narcissist, but the person who's dealing with the narcissist. So some kind of they would be the ones dealing with all of these cuts by 1,000 slices of paper.
Exactly.
Well, then if that's the case, and I've had to have these kind of conversations with people in my life, friends and family members, where I have to explain, not that I know for certain why the other person is behaving in a way, but very simply that they are going to continue to behave in this way. And so the conversation is with the other person, like you're saying, is this something you can tolerate? Or is this something that you would hope to change, but in reality, you're not going to be able to change? And so, for somebody like that, is it possible for you to kind of step into the mind frame of a narcissist and explain just a little bit, maybe why they're doing the things they're doing, or like is there a way to see the world from their viewpoint? And then obviously you're not going to change them, but at least can you then start to see why it is that they operate the way that they operate?
To some extent. There's actually a lot to unpack there, so I'll try to remember everything. When it comes to stepping into their mindset, I think we often look for the why, which to some extent is a mistake, unless we're telepaths, because we don't really understand what's going on. I think it's helpful to remember Jung's suggestion that if you don't know why someone does something, look at the result and assume that's the goal. So I remember one person I had a relationship with a long time ago. We had lunch some years back, ended up doing a video about her. And she was, the lunch was exhausting. The conversation was exhausting. She was complaining again about her husband and basically belittling him, castrating him, just being really mean. And I sort of took his side. And so she started attacking me also. And at one point I asked her, if your children were, or if we paid you $1 million in a year to stop acting like this with him, could you do it? And of course, she had this look of contempt of don't care about money. I said, okay, you got children with him. If your children were taken hostage and you had to stop belittling him for a year, or your children were executed, could you do it? And there I thought, for once I had a bit of sincerity from her. She said, I don't know if I can do it. I enjoy it too much. So why she enjoys it, I don't know. Don't care. I know her mum's a nut job. Terrible person. And she's been, just from what I've seen, terribly, terribly abusive to multiple people. And I think at the end of the day, she enjoys it. I remember one time when we were together, we were teenagers, and she made me snap. And as soon as I snapped, she had this massive smirk of, yeah, there we go, I got you to react. She enjoys the power of getting people to react. She enjoys pushing people out of a comfort zone. They went to see a couples therapist, which I think illustrates why it's so important to work with people who actually understand personality disorders. And the therapist summarized it as being, well, you want your husband to react, and he doesn't give you what you want. So you keep going at him. It's relentless constantly. And he shuts down. So it's a bit like a tortoise who closes in its shell when the hail comes down. And she thought it was cute, and the therapist thought it was cute. And I thought, this is just abuse. If the person shuts down and they can't take it, and you just keep going until you break them, maybe that's the goal. You want to break him. And so I've seen it time and time again. Some people have the sadism of enjoying the power, enjoying breaking other people, enjoying making people lose what they love the most, because they have the sense of power, I guess. So I think entering the mindset, why are they like that? I don't know. But if we look at it through the lens of people trying to extract energy from others, a bit like, well, energetic vampires. If you think, if we imagine vampires are real, we can ask, how did this person become a vampire? And we don't know what the explanation is. But if you say this person is a vampire, they are trying to suck the blood out of someone, then you can anticipate why they act the way they act. They do it in order to suck the blood out of someone. So with energetic vampires, why do they do what they do? Because they want to extract the energy from the other person. They're addicted to it. They enjoy it. Who knows? Makes them feel good. That sort of is irrelevant. And we can predict the behaviors. So if someone's in a relationship with a toxic person and they're going to go to like I mentioned, a Christmas dinner with the parents, you can anticipate there's going to be some drama in probably the 24 to 48 hours before the dinner. So sufficiently little time for it to be a problem and not enough time to be able to solve the problem. It has to be when there's too little time to solve the problem. So if you know it happens, you can go, well, I remember one person saying, I'm a doofus. I shouldn't bring this up now. It's like, okay, you say that, and you systematically bring up the worst possible topics at the worst possible time, like it's 100% hit rate. So you could say you're clumsy, but for someone who's clumsy, this is incredibly constant. You're hitting a bullseye every single time. It's timing it for the maximum effect. So you can say you're clumsy, but what I see is someone who's very calculating, very effective. So in terms of the why, I think it's the best paradigm. Whatever the outcome is, it's what they want, and they act in a way to get that outcome. And why? Because they're wired that way.
Oh man. So there's a lot there that resonates with me. Even the example of bringing up topics at the most inopportune time. I've definitely experienced that with people in my life. And I'm pretty open on this podcast, so I don't mind sharing some of the details. But I have
I'd love to have an example.
No, that exact example that you gave. So I had a situation. So I'm at a point in my life where I've had to distance myself from a lot of people, particularly I was raised in an LDS or Mormon family. And so there's people that I've come to interact with through the religion and that I've had to kind of distance myself from. But there's also people in my own family that I've had to distance myself from. And that example right there, one of those people is my mother. And that exact example is like, I had this, when you start to realize that you have this person in your life who's draining your energy, this energy vampire, that's exactly how I describe it too, is you just, as you go through life, you realize who are the people you come away from feeling energized or uplifted, and who do you come away from feeling like you need about a week to recover.
Exactly.
And so I was at a point in my life where I was discovering this kind of for myself. I hadn't really gone looking for information related to it. I just started to feel it and recognize it more and more. And so, I had a conversation with one of my siblings, and I thought it was a private conversation. But then, the next time I was with my mom sidled up, and the thing was, she wanted to talk about these issues that I was having, and she was coming into town, and it's not like she texted me, called me, emailed me, Facebooked me. It's not like she reached out and before she got there and said, hey, let's take some time and go have a lunch. In fact, I've never done that with my parents. Like, I've never gone for a lunch. And no, it's like they wait until everybody's there and it's a crowded space and I'm in the kitchen and I'm trying to cook and there's all these people around. And that's when, she sidles up next to me and says, so I hear there's some things you want to talk to me about. And so it plays, the way I see it is exactly like you're saying. It may seem innocent, but it's so calculating, because then if I don't talk about it in that moment, then it can always be my fault that we didn't talk about it.
I'm curious with this one. If you put yourself in the situation, you're in the kitchen, you're trying to cook, for your family, maybe other people. So you're doing something really nice for everyone. How do you want the evening to be? What is your intention?
I think my intention is always just to enjoy the moment with other people. I enjoy cooking and putting out some food, some drinks for some people, and then just everybody spending time together, enjoying themselves. And I think it's that simple for me. It's like I just want everybody to enjoy themselves. Like, we're just getting together have a good time. Yeah.
Okay. This is something to remember. It's tough to wrap our head around, but when there's an outcome that we want, this gives them power to interfere.
Right.
Because you're in the kitchen, you're cooking, you want everyone to have a good time. She brings up something, and now all of a sudden you have a problem.
Right.
Because you want everyone to enjoy, but you can't ignore her. So that automatically gives her power because she's got a power of disruption. So when she did that, how would you react?
At the time, I just very simply said, like, I can't talk about this right now. This is not the time.
Okay. How did she react?
It's hard to remember specifically at this point. I think I probably was so flustered emotionally, or just like so frustrated emotionally, that I just moved on to what I was doing. But I think the way that she would react is, there's a little bit of sulking, like, oh, you don't want to talk to me, but then immediately just turning around and going back to whatever, just jumping right back into doing whatever she was doing before, acting as if, everything's great and she's having a great time.
Okay, so that's not bad, because in that case, it's the small test is, can I get under his skin? Didn't work. Retract, as opposed to now it's making a scene out of it.
Yeah, well, now you're talking about a whole nother, like, now you're talking about this interaction that we've had our whole, like, this back and forth. And that's the other part of what I discovered, was that I'm the kind of person who, well, there's these different responses that you can have. So there's the fight, flight, or freeze, but then there's also another fourth one that I've heard of called fawn. And I think in a lot of the cases growing up, I got really good at this fawning, where I just moved on as if nothing had happened. And I just kind of like, around my family, I was very just closed off, like just not a lot. I wasn't sharing a lot emotionally, either through language or through my physical demeanor, my nonverbal language. I just wasn't sharing a lot. And so when I think back on it, that's probably what I did, was I just immediately closed off and shut down, and like wanted to just go for a walk or something and just get away from the whole situation. But that's that dynamic.
It's understandable, especially when we're younger. We don't have any power over it. It can be very difficult. And sometimes all they want to do is wind us up, walk away, know they've ruined our evening, and we're not saying anything because you don't know how to say it. So what I found really helpful with this is, anytime you're going to be around someone toxic, it's to think, I know they will try to do something to disrupt the evening or to disrupt the event. The question is, what are they going to do? So instead of being afraid if they will do it, be certain they will do it. And when they do it, accept it's their choice to try it. They're allowed to try it, and you're allowed to say no. She's allowed to bring up any topic she wants at any point in time, and you're allowed to say, not interested. We often feel obligated to someone, especially a parent. And if we don't want to do something, it's fine. Then something I found really helpful is to sort of move up one level, to take a step back, and sometimes just ask the question of, or make a statement, I understand you want to talk about this. And then ask a question of going, do you consider that in the course of the next 2 weeks, this is the ideal moment for us to talk about it? And you want to label it to get a no-oriented question. So they'll reply by saying, well, no, because you just made it sound ridiculous. No, in the next 2 weeks, do you think that this is the best moment for us to talk about it? Often you get a knee-jerk reaction, well, no. And then afterwards you can ask, well, in that case, how come you're bringing it up now? So it sort of puts them in a situation where you make them look ridiculous. You're not reacting, but you're using their own logic against them, but not starting a fight. Just saying, I think they're better moments. I mean, you might disagree, but if you want to talk about it now, then the consequence is I stop the cooking because I can't do both of these at the same time. We inform everyone that they're not going to have food because you've decided you want to talk about this now. I think it might be a bit embarrassing. But if that's what you want, I'm happy to go and tell everyone. That's sort of the calling their bluff, because often they want to avoid, or they know we want to avoid shame and guilt and being embarrassed. And if you just go straight in with the embarrassment and just own it, saying, I'm happy to do that, it's your choice, then often they shy away from it.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, the calling their bluff, but then also just turning their strategy back on them, where they first of all, this idea that they suddenly realize how ridiculous the situation is for a conversation is humorous just to begin with, but then to take whatever they want. So here's the question that I have though. We talk about these people being energy drainers or energetic vampires. And a big part of that is not recognizing what they're doing. And so you're kind of going through it unconsciously, this pattern with them. And so they're getting what they want and you're not even aware that they're taking it. But then at some point you become aware of that. And so the way I think about it is what you're describing is coming in with a strategy or knowing how to respond to them. That also takes a type of energy. It almost seems like a different type of energy, where one of them is an emotional energy and the other one is almost like a pre-planned kind of a strategic energy or even tactical energy, where you're like, this is how I'm going to interact with them. And I guess maybe it's not even a question, just point out that either way, these people are energy drainers. And I think almost, especially for somebody who's, maybe they've got some neuroticism, or maybe they just, they have some social anxiety, or, they've considered themselves an introvert, any of these things, they're going to come to any social situation already feeling like I have to prepare myself a little bit, or I have to like bring the energy up a little bit. But a lot of times when you interact with somebody who's just a genuinely good person to interact with, they listen to you, they want you to enjoy yourself as much as they want to enjoy themselves. It's as if you come away from it not having to exert any of these types of energies. I don't know if it's even a question, again, just talking through it, but like there's always, if you've identified that you have this relationship with somebody who behaves in a narcissistic way, it's always going to be some type of energy required just to interact.
Yes, I think the distinction there would be between the knee-jerk reactions and the energy exerted to avoid the knee-jerk reaction. You mentioned before the fear responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and that's related to fear. So the function of fear is to deal with uncertainty and deal with danger. Danger means uncertainty. And the fear response is one of the strongest that we have. With the COVID situation, people were hoarding toilet paper. There was a fear response. So why are you doing it? Don't know. Everyone else is doing it. Seems like a good idea. I don't know why. But then, by the way, Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize of Economics, who died 2 weeks ago, he was talking about system 1 and system 2 of how the brain operates. System 1 is the automatic responses. System 2 is the logical side. System 2 requires much more energy. System 1 is autopilot. And about 90% of the time, if not more, we operate on system 1. Simply, it allows us to get through the day, to survive most of the time without major hurdles and without taking too much energy. Now, the thing is, if we're not aware of this, and if we can easily be triggered through fear or anger, the other person controls us completely, and we don't see it. I'm reminded, anytime I think of this, of being at high school, playing badminton with a girl in my class, and I was toying with her. We did it for a few minutes, but I was laughing so much. I was basically hitting the thing to the left, and she'd run across the court, holding the rack in front of her to the left. Then I hit it to the right, and she'd run across the right, and I do it again, left and right. And then I do, how do you call it, the soft one, where she'd have to run to the net. Then I do a hard one, and she'd have to run up. She'd get the sun in her eyes, and she'd miss it. And I did like 3 times in a row. And then at one point, she realized I was laughing. And so I explained to her exactly what I was doing. And so she was annoyed, but amused at the same time. And I find that quite often with toxic people, it feels as though we're running around the court. We've got no idea what's happening. Everything's tough. We're missing every point. And suddenly somebody says, well, don't you see what they're doing? They're actually winding you up by playing all of these things. So unlike badminton, where you're supposed to not miss the point, one of the important things to remember is with other people, we have the choice of how we respond. We don't need to say anything. We don't need to do anything. We can remain silent. We can observe. And if someone keeps pushing us, of saying, you know, well, go on, say something, keep doing it, we don't have to respond. We can allow them to escalate as much as they want. We don't have to respond. We can take a step back and just observe the dynamics. You know, I'm reminded of he was something, either Blackadder or Monty Python, some of the English comedians, somebody acting something weird. I think it was Monty Python and the Life of Brian. And someone looks at the person and goes, you know, what's an eccentric performance? So they label what the other person is doing. It can be very, very productive, going, wow, that's such a negative way to frame things. Or, wow, you seem really upset. Taking a step back and labeling the situation becomes a superpower because it snaps us out of the hypnosis. It snaps us out of the dynamic of they push and we react. Otherwise, it feels a bit like a pinball. You're the ball on the pinball and you keep going, you know, get bounced everywhere. It feels like you've got no agency. It's so important to remember, the only thing we have to do in life is breathe. That's all we have to do. Everything else is a choice. Drinking water, eating food is a choice. We over the course of a few days, we've got choice. We've got the choice of how we respond to people. There are always, of course, consequences, but we can roughly choose the pattern we want. Somebody shouts at us, we can shout back, we can apologize, we can try to headbutt them, we can walk away, we can laugh at them, we can ignore them, we can yawn, we can label it, we can try to label their emotions, we can try to wind them up, wind them down. We have choices. It's easy to forget about this, and it can seem impossible, and it's just so important to remember other people have the right to be obnoxious. They've got the right to be manipulative. They've got the right to lie. I mean, legally, they've got all of these rights. Ethically, it's something else, but they've got these rights, and we've got the right to not put up with the rubbish if we don't want to. We don't owe them anything. And even if someone's been nice to us, you know, we could say, well, we owe them something out of reciprocity. Not legally. We can choose to pay it back out of friendship, which makes us a decent person. Fine. And we don't have to. It's a choice. It's not an obligation. And to remember that we choose to be decent people or obnoxious people, that gives us back a bit of agency, a bit of power, as opposed to thinking, I need to do what other people expect of me or else. And when you're mentioning the people with social anxiety and fear, there's a great book I recommend, which is The Power to be Disliked. The Courage to be Disliked by Kishimi and Toga, I think, Kishimi. It's based on the philosophy of Alfred Adler, who was one of the great psychotherapists with Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. And the book is all about how if we want to live a life, we know some people are going to dislike us, and it's fine. Because if we try to please everyone, well, we end up not being ourselves. And it runs people through, so it's very easy to read a book. It runs people through the logic of just saying, well, you know, some people are going to dislike you. So how about you accept that as a certainty and, you know, and try to build upon that certainty to have a life that actually works out for you, because otherwise we try to please everyone and then we're not living our life, or we're not having the life that we could have or we want to have.
Yeah, it's really helpful. This idea of people liking you. I've actually had that exact conversation with people in my life when they're talking about somebody who at least I would look at them and say, I think they're behaving in a manipulative or narcissistic way. And I've had to have that exact conversation where a friend of mine or a family member says, I just want this person to like me. And it's a trap. It's just like being nice can be a trap. Also wanting somebody to like you is a trap, because in general, even if there are people who aren't narcissistic, it doesn't mean that they're going to like you just because you're kind to them, just because you're nice to them. But then when somebody is narcissistic, the conversation I've had to have with people is essentially like, they can't like you. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. This is not somebody who likes or dislikes people. This is somebody who uses people. And so if there's some utility to this relationship for them, even if it's like what you were saying before, they're simply pleased because they know they can control you. Even if it's that simple, they're getting something from you in such a way that they're never going to, in their mind, they're never going to worry about whether or not they like you or whether or not you like them. Those kind of ideas aren't even going to, it's not what they're going to focus on. All they're going to focus on is how much can they use you. And if they can use you and you're constantly trying to get them to like you, then you've already fallen into their trap.
That's a very good point. I think the two things there, the first one is if someone says, I want them to like me, the question would be, why? Why do you want them to like you? What's going on there? Because if you're a decent, likable person and someone doesn't like them, what does it say about them? Not about you. And if you want to like them, that means that the way you are doesn't fit the criteria, which is fine, whatever. But then, like you're saying, these people don't genuinely like other people. They either get annoyed because they can't get what they want, or if they can get what they want, then they despise you because you're too easy. They break you down, and then what they feel is contempt. That's what they say themselves is, they often usually view people as a challenge to overcome. I overcame them. Well, that was easy. Look at that loser. They don't even have healthy boundaries. They don't even put up a fight. And sometimes what they do is they provoke people, saying, let me see how much I can take from you before you actually say that's enough. And then when a person says it's enough, then it's okay, well, now it's too much effort. I liken it to saying, imagine you've got a street with 3 coffee shops and someone comes in every day and says, give me free coffee. And every coffee shop says, just, sorry, we've got a business model. We have to pay rent. You're not getting free coffee. Go away. But one owner says, I want this person to like me. I'll give them free coffee. It's like, okay, now you've got the annoying person showing up every day wanting free coffee, but you want them to like you, so it's fine. A bit like we sometimes see that with people going out and buying bottles of alcohol for their friends, But then just as with the coffee, when the coffee shop owner says, I'm sorry, you have to pay for the coffee from now on, what happens? You don't have a regular customer, a loyal customer. You've got someone who says, well, I'll try my luck next door because maybe I can get free coffee from them. If you have parties where somebody is inviting everyone else and paying for the alcohol and all of the setting, when they stop paying, the people who show up are going to disappear because they're coming for the free booze. They're not coming because they like you. And so it's about determining what dynamic do you want? Do you want to buy your friends? In that case, what quality friends do you have? And if you think that people who are there for free alcohol are going to start liking you as a person, you might be in a bit of a surprise. It's not about you. It could be anyone else. And there was actually a Malaysian con man, was the 1MDB, something like that. Huge scam. And this guy was about 30, 35, spending millions on parties with Paris Hilton and other celebrities. And people said it was so weird. He was throwing this party, spending $1 million on the party with alcohol, and the celebrities showing up, getting paid, obviously, to show up. And he never really talked to anyone, and people just sort of going, well, we're here for a free party. A bit like the, what's the name of the movie with DiCaprio? The one where he throws the parties.
I know the one. Yeah, these are.
We'll remember it afterwards.
Yeah, on Long Island.
Exactly. So people show up because it's a free party. Okay. That's not friends. When you're in need, they're not going to be around anymore. So you can get them to pretend they like you. That doesn't seem like a very good long-term strategy. So what's going on there?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying before about just looking at where, if you don't know why they're doing it, just looking at what the outcome is every time they do it. And then this is what they're after. And so if you're just giving them what they want so that they'll like you, then really all they're after is the things that you're willing to give them.
Probably. And, it's a weird one because you think, I've given them so much, I've invested so much. So logically, this means you've got a basis, a foundation. Then you think, well, what have they given? And if they gave it, did they really, were they using that to hijack reciprocity to make you give more? Which sometimes is the case. And then, you know what this is actually one of the tricks. Is it's cool. Are you familiar with the sunk cost fallacy?
Yeah, I did some business school, so some finance, so I'm familiar with sunk costs. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know the sunk cost fallacy, the idea is if we invest money in something or time in something, the more we invest, the more afraid we are of losing it. So if you invest 2 weeks in a relationship, doesn't work out, it's easy enough to walk away. But if it's been 20 years, you think, well, if I walk away now, I've lost 20 years of my life. But of course, the 20 years are already lost. So the question is about the future. So one of the things they do is they make us invest too much too quickly. So we feel that if we walk away, we've lost it. So it makes the relationship more sticky, especially when it's actually really toxic.
So that's actually there's this term that I'm familiar with, and I'm sure you are too, but it's called love bombing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this idea that you're saying of even the way you phrased it was try to get them to invest too much too quickly. And that's that's like emotional investment, say in a relationship or a friendship or something. But then I think this idea of love bombing is it's like a tactical approach or a strategic approach that they follow. But one of the biggest challenges that I've seen with people is that they genuinely, sometimes these people, they're these toxic people that they're in a relationship with, sometimes they make them feel so good and so special or seen or loved. And what advice would you have for somebody who goes through this pattern of love bombing and then just being, drugged through the mud and then having to figure out what the heck is going on? Any advice there?
Yeah. Just before I do that, Gatsby is the name of the movie. Great Gatsby.
That's right, The Great Gatsby. Okay, yeah, we both graduated high school at some point, I'm sure, because I think that's the last time I read it. Yeah.
So for the love bombing, I think what's happening is something like this. Love bombing is a test. If you meet someone in a bar and they walk up to you and they go, "You are amazing. You've got all of these qualities. We should get married. I want to have your children. I've been waiting all my life to meet you." You look at the person and you think, you need a psychologist. Like, sure, I'm great, but you don't know me. This is ridiculous. It makes no sense. This is like, we haven't even spoken. So you're a nut job. And if we get it a little bit later, and if they pick up on various things and they keep giving us compliments, we love to be validated. We love to be seen. We love to be heard. And it feels fantastic. The thing is, most hinged people are not that enthusiastic about people they meet. So they'll say nice things. It doesn't seem over the top. So if you see it happening to one of your friends, you'll say that seems too quick. It doesn't make sense. There's something fishy going on. If it's us, it's a massive blind spot, usually because we've been waiting all our life for this, and we've been told that you meet someone and you fall in love and it's magical and it happens like in the movies. So we're primed to be vulnerable to this if we don't have the red alert going off. And when that happens, either we cut things off, but then there's always the doubt of, what if I was wrong? And sometimes I've seen people cut things off because they go, this seems too good to be true, so I'm just getting out of here, when actually the other person was just being genuine, and by there was taking things slowly. Now, I think what happens, I'm trying to wrestle with how to explain this idea, but I'll try it now. And then you can ask more if it's not very clear, is imagine that in life, people have certain units of energy to give. So let's say 3 units. They can give 1 unit to work, and work goes well, so they get 1 unit back, and they're trying to balance this out. So it regenerates, but you get up to 3 units. The love bombing involves putting 2 or 3 units in the relationship very quickly, too quickly. And then it feels great because you're getting this attention. Having the other person say, look at everything I'm giving you. So it feels like a high reward relationship and low risk because you haven't done anything to earn it. But you don't need to do anything because you're amazing. Therefore, I want to give you all of this. So the relationship is getting like 3 units from the other person. Gradually, they start giving a bit less, so we give a bit more. So they give 2 units, we give 1 unit. Or maybe they give 3, we give 1. So the relationship is going well. At one point, they stop doing it. And so we're there to keep 3 units. We have to give all 3 of our units. So they don't like us being focused on work, family, hobbies, friends, sport, sleep, anything. They don't like it. They want everything for them. They want to hoard all of our energy. And if we don't give it, they're sort of saying, well, the relationship's going to be gone. So we're hooked on the initial love bombing phase. We want to go back to that phase. And then we're in a situation that's not the same. We blame ourselves because we think, well, the reason why it went downhill is because I didn't give enough quickly enough. And then it's easy to get obsessed with what's going on. So the suggestion I have is to go back in time during the love bombing phase and ask, how convinced are you that that was sincere versus a lie? Does it seem credible that it was sincere? And generally, when people go back, they think it was too much, too quickly. The person said they adored all of these things about me, but now they're criticizing all of those things. So there's been a switch. It could be that they loved it, but now they've changed their mind, but that doesn't seem credible. So either they're lying with the criticism or they're lying with the nice things they said. But, as we know, few people will lie and criticize someone. So they'll invent things to dislike about the person. Most people lie about the nice things. Because if you lie about the nice things, you get something out of it. If you lie about the negative things, you think the person's amazing, but you're telling them crap because what? It wouldn't make any sense. So just think, you've got the 2 scenarios. Either they were sincere when they started out and now they're lying, or they were lying when they started out and now they're sincere. One of the 2 is more credible than the other. And then it's hard to go back, but it's important to go back and think, the person who was love bombing me, the person whom I fell in love with, who basically was giving me a reflection that I wanted to see. So there's also an interesting dynamic there of, they put us on a pedestal. We feel amazing, like the sun shines out of our backside. There's something where we know it's not completely hinged, but it feels good, so it's understandable. If the person doing that, maybe that was sincere, but maybe it was a fake persona, so a fake image they were giving in order to seduce us. One of those 2 scenarios is more credible. To me, the one where the person that we fell in love with never even existed, that one is more credible. That's a bit like in any movie, someone's a double agent and suddenly the mask drops and they show who they really are. So it's a thing of, like, if you see someone who seems super nice and they drown kittens, you've got 2 scenarios. Either they're a lovely person who's pretending that they're drowning kittens, or they're a kitten drowner who pretends to be a nice person. The only question is, the kittens, are they drowned or not? If you see the kittens being drowned, they're drowned. So it's a kitten drowner, and kitten drowners are not nice people. And then it's always thinking, when you observe someone, you don't go for the average. It's a mistake people often make, is saying sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're awful. That's like saying, if you put your feet in the freezer and in your head in the oven, your average temperature is quite pleasant. It's like, yeah, but your head in the oven isn't great and your feet in the freezer isn't very nice either. So what's important is, what is the worst someone does? If someone's great 90% of the time, but then they drown kittens, they're still a kitten drowner. Or, it's like saying, O.J. Simpson, well, overall, he was a great guy, just had a bad day. It's like, yeah, that was a pretty bad day. So that is what he's capable of. We look at what the worst someone does, and that tells us who they are. And the rest, how deep can someone go? To be a bit annoyed with someone, it's one thing. To start picking fights, to maximize the damage, to berate someone, to give them death by 1,000 cuts, that's a completely different type of person. And to enjoy it, that scares me. Those are the sadists. It's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this idea of the scenario you give of somebody approaching you in a bar or in a social setting, and it comes across flirtatious. I mean, oftentimes romance is where we meet a lot of these people, and all this stuff that you're talking about of meeting somebody for the first time. They put you on a pedestal. They compliment you. They make you feel good. They talk about how you are all these things that they want in a relationship, or that they would want a lot of this to go back to this idea of Carl Jung and what he talks about. The initial phase of a relationship, a romantic relationship, is all about projecting onto the other person all of these things that you wish you could find in yourself. And unfortunately, what would happen is, or what I think I see happen, is that most people just see themselves as like a genuine person, whether they're completely conscious or unconscious. They aren't going out to look to manipulate people. They want to meet other genuine people and have good relationships. The challenge is that when you come into contact with somebody who is intentionally going out looking to manipulate people, not only do they understand how you're going to, like you're saying, they're giving you a test to see how you're going to react. The way that you react is going to show them how aware you are of these projections that people put out on each other in a romantic way, or even in a friendship way, where you interact with people oftentimes because they have some quality that you find endearing, or and when they can fill you up with all these feelings that they're projecting onto you, all these amazing things, and then in return, I think just a normal person would then get caught up in this like Twitter patient type phase, and they start projecting back onto the other person, oh, they're just so amazing, they're so great. When that all falls out, because there's this quote that I wish I knew who said it. I have it written down somewhere, but they simply said that narcissists don't have relationships, they take prisoners. And when somebody finally realizes that not only was this person not actually projecting onto you all these great things, but they were using that against you to make you feel good so that they could later control you. It's so outside of the mindset of most people to be that manipulative or to approach a relationship in such a way that I think that a lot of people, it's just so shocking that the hardest thing to accept is that this person is, like you said, a kitten drowner. To come full circle and actually accept that, oh, this person is actually not at all what I thought they were. Not only that, they're like the worst version of that person that they could possibly be. It's just so, it can be so just downright just disheartening. It can be it's so just devastating.
It's terrible to go through that, because your basic map of reality, the way you understand the world, is crumbling.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of have a map of the world. You've got an idea of what the world is like, what happens if you go into a supermarket, what happens if you say something to people, and you build your world around people close to you. So if you have someone close to you and you are relying on them, you had a certain vision, you have to realize not only did that person not exist, so you have to mourn not only the relationship, but the very existence of the person. But then you realize also that you introduced a person into your ecosystem that was toxic. So imagine we cave people and I bring back someone into the tribe and that person poisons the well. So everyone's getting sick and it's my fault. It's my responsibility because I brought them into my ecosystem. And there were signs. I didn't want to see the signs. I let it happen. Part of it is also learning to forgive ourselves about that we were tricked and so on. But it's also realizing that, yeah, we allowed that to happen. Part of us, I think, is terrified of that because, that's a massive physical and psychological threat. And I think that's one reason why we get obsessed with it, is to understand what was the danger, how do I prevent it from happening again in the future? And until I understand the mechanics, I don't know if I can trust myself because I might make another mistake. Now, fortunately, it's possible to understand the mechanics and the dynamics, our vulnerabilities, how were we manipulated, what are the symptoms of manipulation, so that we can just go, well, it's 10% of the population is toxic, or has a personality disorder. I think also it's really tough for these people because this is one of the weird tricks. When they love bomb us, it's normal to think, wow, this person is an amazing judge of character. After all, they see all the great things about me, Therefore, I listen to them with whatever they say. And they want this kind of power, and that kind of power backfires. I remember one person who, her way to my heart was when I played with a band, we did a concert, and she came up and she loved my music. It was amazing, and said all of these things like, wow, this is great. And lo and behold, I think it was a year later, I stopped playing with other musicians because she'd caused a rift between us. And she criticized my music as being bad writing, bad singing, and everything was terrible. I didn't understand what was going on, but that was part of her strategy. And then something also that I'm thinking of is, it's really important to remember, because people often say, how could I be so stupid? It's not about intelligence, because something intelligent people are good at doing is seeing patterns. And something these people are good at doing is giving dots of information and letting us fill the blanks. So because we fill the blanks, we can find, reasons why. So why did you break up with your ex? I can think of 3 different reasons. And we lay it out and they say, yeah, you're right. That's it. But if we ask them to explain, they can't explain. And we're very good at putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, finding hypotheses. This is something that's really important to stop doing, is to stop filling the blanks and just say, I don't know. Or if they say, well, what do you think? I can tell you what I think, but how about this? I'll write down on a piece of paper what I think. You write down on a piece of paper what you think or what's going on. And then we compare, because otherwise I'm going to be telling you what I'm thinking. And then all you have to say is, that's it. One woman did that with me. I was asking. And at one point she just got annoyed. Just tell me what it is. But I want to see how you understand me. Just tell me what it is. I don't have time for this. Because she had no clue. She had no imagination. But I spent my time filling the blanks, and every mental map I made didn't correspond to reality. And every time I saw it wasn't corresponding, I was getting obsessed. But that's part of the trick, is we fill the blanks. And, we fill the blanks. They say we're right. So we put them as a judge position, but that also takes away from our agency. And then that's when we get obsessed again.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that you often talk about is the comparison between, say, a cult leader and a narcissist, or being stuck in a cult versus being stuck in some kind of a relationship with a narcissist. And we don't have a ton of time. We're actually just up on the hour, but I just want to see if really quickly you could just summarize why these two things are similar. From the very beginning, I said that there's like this psychology that's interesting to me at the individual level, the relationship level, and the group level. And are these just, when it comes to whether you're in a romantic relationship, you have some kind of a work relationship, or whether you're in some kind of a cult relationship or cult dynamic, are these the same forces at play? Is this the same manipulative tricks at play, just on a group rather than an individual?
Pretty much. My explanation to that is, we have mental vulnerabilities. Any manipulative person takes advantage of it. The manipulation techniques are pretty much identical, with minor differences, be it with a person, be it with a toxic group, be it with a cult, be it with, sometimes I talk about political cults that I've known, and I could see was the same dynamics. Often it's the same highly toxic individuals inside those organizations. Just thinking of it, what kind of person is attracted to positions of authority, positions of power, and making other people work for them? Well, it's people with personality disorders. So if you look inside any organization in the management, if we know that 10% of the population has a personality disorder, the question would be, if you took all managers in a country, would the percentage of them with a personality disorder be exactly 10%, so the same as the population, lower, exactly 0, or higher? And I'd bet it's higher. If you take media corporations, would you say the percentage of people with a personality disorder in media is the same as the population, 10%, lower, exactly 0, or higher? It's probably higher. If you take NGOs, same thing. If you take anything around the arts, theater companies, bands, musicians, and so on, probably higher, because there's more politics happening. If you take bricklayers, I'd suggest that's probably lower than 10%, because if you know how to lay bricks, then you know what you're doing. With farmers, it's probably lower. Not 0, but probably lower. And I just see the same dynamics. If you study cults, you will see the same dynamics with narcissists. If you study narcissists and you come across a cult, you'll see the same dynamics. One example is when a cult, let's say spiritual or political cult, gets the members to do something unpleasant and unrewarding, such as stand in the street with flyers waiting to talk to people to convert them. You can ask, well, what's the point? Because I've virtually never seen anyone go up to them and think, you've got something going here. It's great. But that's the same as the political cult handing out flyers explaining why society's got some kind of problem. Or it's the narcissist going on holiday, making it miserable. Basically, if someone goes through with the misery, they've got something in common, so they're even more attached to the situation. When someone spent a whole day standing in the street getting rebuffed, it's much harder to leave the cult, because it's much harder to say, well, that was a massive waste of time. This is so stupid, I can't believe it. And when you come back after a horrible relationship with a toxic person, either you've broken up with them, or you go, well, at least we had these good times together. So it's one of these tricks, exactly the same patterns. To me, that's one of the important things is, once you understand the behaviors and the patterns, wherever you see them, red flags should go off, because those are unhealthy behaviors. Even if somebody says, this political movement, I believe in the ideals, but I see these patterns, just pay attention, because narcissists will hijack any organization in order to get what they want. And especially the ones with higher empathy are easier to hijack, such as NGOs, associations, a lot of political organizations. The ones with the highest empathy are the easiest to hijack because they're the easiest to manipulate. And people with higher empathy are easier to hijack because they're easier to manipulate. Guilt trip, shame, blame, say, well, you complain about this, but what about these other people? Then, yeah, you're right. So that's why, to me, it's so important to see the behaviors. We learn more, we can protect ourselves better, we can help maybe organizations not be sabotaged and infiltrated, and keep ourselves safe from relationships with toxic people.
Yeah, thank you. That's it's actually really great advice, like a lot of good stuff in there. Just some of the things you pointed out over the last few minutes is one way in which they can trap you is actually over validating you. They give you too much validation, but then on the other extreme, they might actually trap you with pain or misery, because especially if it's a group, they can get a bunch of people experiencing the same thing and kind of bonding through a shared misery. And then also just people who are very empathetic, people who who aren't navigating life as some kind of game, and they're just trying to be good people. It's also, I think that, so in the very beginning of this conversation, you mentioned how a lot of the stuff out there that you were reading wasn't very helpful as far as identifying narcissists or learning how to deal with them. And I think what you've been talking about now is really this idea that anywhere that there's a status game to be played, you're going to find narcissists playing that status game. And whether it's businesses, governments, NGOs, I would throw in religions, families, teams, social groups, whatever it is. One of the things, this is maybe just my last thought, and then we'll close this up. But one of the things that I found that was challenging when I went looking for information about narcissists was the way that they were being presented. It was really simply something like, they're always going to be dressed the nicest. They're always going to be driving the nicest cars. They're always going to. And so it was like this very specific type of status game. And I just thought, oh, that's so off, because, for example, a religion or just being pious, that itself is a type of status game. And so in that situation, you're not going to find a narcissist who dresses the nicest. It's going to be a narcissist who dresses the part, who dresses like very piously, but uses this story or this religion, this group, to get what they want from other people who also are trying really hard to be, strict or religious. So these were just examples from my own life that I came across, where the status game doesn't always mean money. It doesn't always mean a position of high authority even. It could be the position in a small group of people, and they just cling on to that and use that as their status game as well.
Oh, absolutely. You see that with people who are, outside of the system, and you see how the dynamics operate. I remember one of my professors at university, somebody made a comment, and he just made a snide comment about something to do with, oh yeah, so you think that's important, with sarcasm, mocking anybody who would care about material things, as I'm above all of this. And the guy was getting paid, so he was a university professor, getting paid loads of money. That comment, I know, messed up the lives of dozens of people because they didn't realize he was manipulating them. That created a bad relationship with money. And they thought, well, of course, it's superficial to care about money, which is highly simplistic. It's superficial to care about money? No, it's superficial to not care about money. To only care about money is unhealthy. But to think that you can live a life without caring about money, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Finding a balance in all things is important. But then you've got the people who want to show just how good they are and how much they don't care, which is easy when you're getting paid tens of thousands of dollars a month and you've got all the money. That you're proud, like you're saying, you're proud of wearing ugly clothes with holes, old clothes, having a cheap, ugly watch and a beat up car, but you're sitting on loads of money. So that's also it's part of the status game. And then you get the people who actually buy into it and they try to fall out of the system. And that's a terrible cult, because as soon as you're falling out of the system, you're much more dependent on the people around you. You're not independent. And they say, well, we don't want to be dependent on the system. It's like, well, you can do that, but now who are you dependent on? Your buddies? And what happens if you disagree? Now you're trapped in a cult. You can't get out. They don't want you to thrive. They want you to be dependent on them, all for some kind of LARPing game. But how's it working out for you? And usually it's not working out great. So you're right. And there's, with a lot of the stuff out there, it's overly simplistic. They've got the nicest cars, nicest shoes. That sounds like somebody is bitter because they knew one person who had a nice car and a nice pair of shoes, and they haven't gotten over it. But to me, it's not about exploring one's own anger. If we're still angry, we haven't healed. It's about giving people pointers where they can figure things out, and it has to be accurate and useful instead of just fueling anger. And yeah, there's unhelpful stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you speaking to me about all this stuff, because I think the things that you're talking about, they are those things that are more helpful. Recognizing true red flags, recognizing the pattern that they're having you create in your own mind as they kind of test you and push you in different directions. Again, I'm really grateful for you taking the time to come on and chat with me about this. And you do a podcast and you blog. And do you work with people one-on-one as well? Or is that, or are you mostly just putting stuff out there?
No, I also work with people one-on-one occasionally when it makes sense. The two approaches. One approach is the more, let's say, rational, strategic approach. So decoding what's happening, trying to map out the situation, trying to see what the options are, see what strategies can work, basically, help people be a bit more aware of the reactions they have, see the alternatives they have, and then try and make the best decisions. And then another part is also going through more emotional, energetic work. So when people have a heavy load, try to release the anger, the sadness, get it out of the system so they can think and strategize a bit more clearly. Makes them harder to manipulate, but also makes the life less unpleasant. And it's like if you have a cut, you can rationalize why you have a cut, but at one point you just need to disinfect it and let the wound heal. And that's where the some ways of working with that are helpful.
Okay, awesome. And then if people wanted to find your writing or your podcast, or even get in touch with you to do something like that, where would they find you?
The easiest way is looking for Frederik Ribersson. So the website is ribersson.com. On YouTube and on Twitter, it should be F Ribersson in one word. And then on the website and Twitter, they're the ways to contact me.
Okay. Well, awesome. I really appreciate this again, Fred. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.